Should Nebraska play Oklahoma every year? Should they play Colorado every year? Both? Because some folks feel that Florida should play Florida State and Miami every year, and neither one of those teams are in the SEC for now. Should we play both of them? Neither one of them, one or the other? Give me just a quick synopsis, because we got to talk way more about it later on in the show. But what is your immediate reaction? Just give me a quick synopsis or quick answer here.
Well, the quick answer is just absolutely. I'd love for Nebraska to have those old rivalries back. And so, yeah, one or the other. I wouldn't even care. I wouldn't care if it's Kansas State, Iowa State. I mean, I just love to have an old Big 8 rivalry back. Obviously, ranking in importance, Colorado and Oklahoma would be above that. But that would be awesome, because as these conference realignment and all that, Nebraska has been among the most hurt as far as long-term rivalries.
Yes, that is so true. I want to know from the fine folks at home, everyone out there listening, should Nebraska have a yearly non-conference rival that we play each and every year? Now, if we're doing 9 conference games, you only get 3 non-conference games. I suppose this would be in place of, well, we're not playing any big-time non-conference games. If we were to play a 1-game big-time non-conference game every year, which does not seem to be the plan, they're definitely not going to do a non-conference rival that you play every year plus a big-time non-conference game. But let's just live in this universe where we can get whatever the heck we want. Would you rather have Nebraska play Colorado, Oklahoma, or somebody else year in and year out? Now, I got to push back on Kansas State, Iowa State. Oh, no. It's got to be one of the two that I aforementioned. All right, you said you don't care. You just miss those old rivalries.
You wouldn't do Missouri every year?
No. No, I would not. It's for me, it's got to be something with a little bit of meaning. And then there's meaning and history behind Kansas State, Iowa State, Missouri. Like Nebraska, all those rivalries are basically gone, at least from a year in, year out basis. I know we're going to play Oklahoma again here in a couple of seasons, if it doesn't get canceled. And I know we just played Colorado 4 times in recent memory as well. But unfortunately, when it comes to I don't want to say storied rivalries, but the history that we had with all these other schools is kind of gone. That's what happens when you go to a brand new conference and things of that nature. But I'm going to hear from fine folks at home. Oklahoma, Colorado, or would you rather have a big time? We're not going to put the don't play anybody hard as an option. It's probably what we're going to do. But we're just not going to put it as an option. Okay, fine. We'll put it as an option. So you got 4 options here. Oklahoma, Colorado, or would you rather have a yearly big-time non-conference opponent that kind of rotates? Maybe it's, I was going to say USC, but they're not now in the Big Ten. Maybe it's Miami for a couple years, and then maybe it's Gag Me U for a couple of years, or dare I say Tennessee, which it was supposed to be. Or would you rather, hey, let's get as many wins as we can, let's not play anybody tough, or would it be Colorado, Oklahoma? Does that question kind of make sense? It evolved as I was speaking, and I hope it made sense the longer I spoke. Did that kind of make sense there?
Yeah, it does. I mean, and there's plenty. It's kind of funny just reading the early response off the text line. There's a little bit of altering it for themselves as well. So.
Oh, okay. We'll do initial. We're going to dive more into this later in the show. Nebraska's win total is at 7.5. We've got Big Ten team win totals. Ohio State's 10.5. Oregon's 10.5. Penn State's 10.5. SEC win totals. Nobody's above 9.5. By the way, I might add in the SEC. It's because they're so tough. It's the NFL. All right, of college football. But immediately, what are we getting response-wise?
3764 is what I was referring to. He said rotate the old Big 8 schools. That would be ideal. But other than that, we've got Jason Baird says Texas. Chad in Seward says Oklahoma, Colorado, Kansas State in that order of preference. Bone says definitely has to be Oklahoma or Colorado. We've got Oklahoma from 1922. Old Dad says I say play Colorado for sure. And Drumstick says Colorado, Kansas State, or Oklahoma. So K-State seemed to get a lot more run than maybe what you initially brushed off.
I did brush them off initially. That is a fair statement. For me, we always ended our season either against Oklahoma, then it was against Colorado, and now it's against Iowa. It doesn't have to be. I mean, they were put there in those slots for a reason. I personally always kind of looked at Colorado as the little brother. I did, all right? And if you haven't heard me say this before, when I played, my sister was dating and then married to a big-time Colorado fan. And his entire family was Colorado fans. So every year, what happened when my Nebraska squad played Colorado, whatever happened to that game, I heard about it for an entire year. So Colorado always had a little bit more emphasis for me just because I didn't want to hear them flap their frickin' gums. And I in turn wanted to be the one flapping my gums talking trash instead. I went 3-1, okay, during my playing days versus Colorado. And it was interesting. I played some of my best games versus the Buffs. And I would text them afterwards, mostly if we won. And I'd be like, thanks for giving me inspiration. I just played a little better today because of you. And I know it's probably comes across as a joke or sarcastic. I was dead serious. Like, I did not want to hear it from them. I do remember, so Mark was my sister's husband, and the father-in-law was Kevin. Remember the first time I ever met Kevin, I went to his house. We park. I'm walking in, and there's a big rock in front of his door with like the CU Buff logo and all that. And I can see Kevin in the window doing something, like at the sink, like I don't know what he was doing, like making supper or whatever, doing dishes. I don't know what he was doing. And I can see him, but I act like I don't see him. And I pretend to kick the rock and stomp on the rock. And so I didn't actually do it. By the way, if you come to my house, there's a big, gigantic throw the bones rock in front of my front door. Okay. So I walk in the house. He couldn't have been nicer. He's like, hey, Adam, nice to meet you. You know, we chatted, very friendly, had a couple of, not verbal jabs, but just giving each other a little bit of crap. He goes, oh, by the way, I noticed you like my rock. Would you like to have it? Type deal. And I was like, no, I don't want that thing. But he couldn't have been any nicer, and I felt so bad afterwards, to be honest with you. But then over time, reality set in. Like, everyone can be nice for a while, and they were really nice. But my point is, over time, the chirping would happen. Like, I think I was redshirting this year, so I wasn't even playing in that game, Nebraska, Colorado. But as the year rolled around and we got to know each other more, and it became obvious I was going to play a little bit more the year, my redshirt freshman year, not the year I redshirted, all of a sudden the chirping added into it a little bit more. Even with all that, I always kind of viewed Colorado as a little bit of the little brother aspect of it. And there was a lot of great games on those Black Fridays. There really was for a long time. But I've always kind of looked at Oklahoma just in a unique way. And the thing with Iowa's kind of been building. It needs to be more. We need to get more W's to make it feel more two-sided than we've gotten recently. But we're going to dive a little bit more into that. What prompted that? Joel Klatt had an article. Well, on his show, and then somebody wrote an article about it. Let me see. Nick Costco wrote the article about it. All right, basically his top 5 non-conference rivalry games that he thinks should be played each and every year. And we're going to kind of go through those 5 games. And he does not have Nebraska playing Oklahoma every year as one of his top 5 rivalries that needs to happen each and every year. We'll discuss who he has, and we'll discuss our reaction to that. Also, Nebraska's win total is at 7.5 for this upcoming season. How do we feel about that? Get people's reactions to that. In the NBA, all right, it's time to start digging a little bit more into the NBA. The NBA playoffs, as we know, are in full swing. Is it rigged? At least the draft lottery, the trades. Is it rigged? It's the trade with Luka Doncic to the Lakers, where they get Anthony Davis, who's a little bit older. With all due respect, another player whose name escapes me at the moment, and then 1 first-round pick, and I'm just like, what? What world does this make any sense? And then the team, who had a 1.8% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick in the next draft, all of a sudden gets the number 1 overall pick. And then you start to see some crazy reports and insiders talking. Now, who knows what's true and who's not? But is the NBA draft lottery NBA draft lottery rigged? Easy for me to say. So we'll dive into that a little bit. What are some of the other comments we're getting off the text line right now, Jake?
Let's see here. Corey in Lincoln says the 05 game in Boulder was epic. Entire student body was ejected, if you remember that. Bones says Texas would be okay too. So kind of looking forward to that.
Okay, we got to pause. You want to see Texas every year? Every year. This is a yearly thing. You want to see Texas every year. I need a little bit more explanation on why Texas every year. Now, if you said one school, one time, or one school for a 2-year series, home and home series, it's Texas. Every year? You want to see them every year? Jake, what do you think about seeing them every year potentially?
Gosh, part of the reason I hate Texas, and Texas is up there with the Yankees, is all my sports, just ultimate hate, is that they The Texas-Nebraska rivalry was one-sided too. That was the problem. I mean, Texas just ruined basically the last 20 years of my life. But I mean, they would break our heart. Just a lot of them were close games, but I don't know. That sounds that sounds like I wouldn't sign up for that. I don't think so.
Again, I if it was one team, one time, Texas. UCF can be interesting too. Don't go down that rabbit hole, Jake. All right, or a home and home 2-game series. Texas would be that'd be the team. For me, Texas. Give me Gag me you. Let's do it. Let's light this candle. Kansas State is an intriguing one. Had I thought beyond, Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas did pop into my head. I just explained that. Kansas State would have been the next team to pop into my head. I mean, they had some good years. They're still a good team. They've had more recent success than we've had. All right, they won a conference title just a couple of years ago, been to a major bowl game. They've had 10-win seasons, 9-win seasons. They've been ranked. They've had more recent success than we've had. When I think back to when, early on in the Big Eight, Kansas State this is one of the things I respected about Bill Snyder. Kansas State was awful. They may have been the worst. They weren't called Power 5 or 6. I mean, there used to be 7 power conferences when you factor in the Southwest, the Big East, the ACC, and all these other conferences. The Southwest obviously no longer exists. Big East no longer exists. It's weird to say the Pac-12 no longer really exists. But when you thought about the power conference schools, they were probably by far the worst program. And amongst the worst in the country, regardless of what conference you were affiliated with. Bill Snyder came in. He had the attitude. And it worked for Kansas State. He built through JUCOs, which is the closest thing we have to modern-day transfer portal. And he scheduled absolutely nobody in the non-conference. And his attitude was, let's start getting wins. Let's just start getting they were so bad. Let's just start getting wins. Let's start getting wins in the win column and start building that up, and then we can build from there. And then hopefully we can start to compete with Colorado. Remember, they were really good in the 80s and 90s, and maybe one day Nebraska as well. And so that's how he did it. So maybe not playing anybody in the non-conference. Obviously, there's advantages to that. Just ask Ohio State, Michigan the past couple of years. As a fan, I want to see good matchups, but I also want what's best for the program. But that's how he built it up. And he took one of the worst programs in college football, period, and turned them into a program that's top 25 in the country, top 30 at worst. So when I think of Kansas State, there were some games where they obviously, you think of Al Roberson, Darren Sproles, they absolutely had some good games against us once they got that first win. Okay, which did take them a while. And there was some back and forth. Going to Manhattan was always interesting. I forget. What was it? That's another Kansas State first down. The cat makes the noise or whatever. That always annoyed the crap out of me if you couldn't tell. I don't know. For me, it would still be Colorado, Oklahoma. But I don't hate the idea of rotating. Maybe you do, if you're trying to shake it up a little bit so it's not always the same team, maybe you rotate. Oklahoma's in the SEC, but maybe you rotate. Colorado's in the Big 12, and then you go Kansas State, Iowa State, some of these other schools. I wouldn't hate that, doing a rotation type deal. What are your thoughts there, Jake, on that?
Yeah, I would love that. I mean, obviously, just kind of going through rotating the Big 8, maybe in a few, Oklahoma State and Texas Tech don't have quite the same allure, I guess, to me as a Nebraska fan. But so kind of those original, the Big 8 would be incredible. Kansas State, too, I think it's always a good comparable program, right? If they can do that, we should be able to do what they're doing. And then I'll say this, and it died down, unfortunately, just because Josh Freeman didn't have as much success at Kansas State as maybe it could have. But from 98 to 2003, all these teams that we talk about hating, that's peak hate Kansas State. And, Missouri kind of took over after that. The Josh Freeman stuff was good. But, we remember the 98 no call on the face mask of Eric Crouch. That really started that rivalry, or heated it up, I should say. And then just every year during that era, man, that was the game of the year basically for Nebraska. For a few of those years, Kansas State, remember, in '98 was a game away from going to the title game.
The single worst missed call I think I've ever seen was the Eric Crouch non-face mask call. It was so bad for so many reasons. It was so bad because it was so blatant. It's not away from the ball. He's got the ball. His head is sideways. It's in front of everybody. The player with the ball. It's so blatant. It's so obvious. It's such an It's not like his head got tilted a little bit and popped right back. Like his head almost got spun all the way around like a Gumby person. And it was so blatant, so bad, so obvious, and it still wasn't called. I know you got the William Floyd fumble, and you got the Corey Dixon punt return. Troy Dumas kind of referred to those the other day when we interviewed him. You got other calls throughout history as well. You've got other games, other levels, other sports where there's been some bad calls. I have a hard time, even if I take my Husker bias out of it, personally thinking of a worst missed call I've ever seen in my entire life at any sport at any level. Can you?
That's right up there. I mean, giving Colorado a 5th down or something like that's kind of ridiculous, but
okay. Now that's a good one though. What was that? 90 versus Missouri?
Yeah.
And what's funny was when I was a kid, because my dad would talk about that. So when YouTube kind of first became a thing, I looked it up. And I was like, yep, down 1, down 2, down 3, down 4, down 5. What? How do you do that? That was against Missouri, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
At home against Missouri, it took them 5 downs to beat Missouri. Okay, what else comes to mind? Now that we're talking about these things, is there people at home, what are some of the worst missed calls you've ever seen at any sport at any level in the history of your sports viewing career? Because those two are hard to beat. Getting an extra down, having your face almost completely ripped off sideways in front of the world while you're holding the ball. What else is up there?
I know people say the 1 second in 09, but I don't know if that's up there for me. I've always said this. I'm a bit of enemy of the state for doing it. I think there was a second left.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
I don't think that was a timekeeper's error. I think there's a second left.
Dude, of all the daggers you've ever dropped on this show, that might be numero uno. Hey, I give you credit for having the grapefruits to just say that out loud.
Yeah, I don't like it. I wish there wasn't. But I think if you did like a basketball, you know, a basketball does like the minutes per seconds, right? It goes right down to the buzzer, 0.3, 0.4.
Yep.
I think there was at least something there.
So you're saying there's maybe not 1 second, but you're saying there's 0.0000001 seconds or more left on the clock.
If you go based on when McCoy, the ball hit something on the sideline, I think so.
So here's my thing. Okay. So when you think about 5th down, you think about the non-call on Crouch with the face mask. I'm curious if anybody can come up with anything else. When it comes to frustration and nauseation level, the 09 1 second back on the clock in the championship game versus Texas is up there. I do think there's a little bit more dispute. Like, I'm just thinking these things are so bad, how do you get it wrong? There's a little bit more dispute. I don't think there was a second left. But there's someone sitting across from me who can dispute it. So to me, it's not at that same level. It is frustration and nauseation-wise, but it's a little bit more disputable. Those other ones were so egregious. How do you mess that up? And then there's literally a national title on the line for Colorado. Kansas State was playing to go to the Big 12 championship game. So was Nebraska at that point. And so you got a championship game on the line. Ultimately, Kansas State's fighting for a national title. So how do you mess these things up that are so egregious and so obvious? Here's the thing with Texas 09 Big 12 championship game. I personally do not think there was a second left. If someone sitting here wearing that god-awful burnt orange looked at me and said, there is a second left, or somebody sitting there who I see on a daily basis, he's not a Benedict Arnold, don't say that, ladies and gentlemen, says there's 0.00001 seconds left on the clock. I love how we all of a sudden went to basketball clockage and how we're using basketball, which, by the way, they do that in basketball. I hadn't even thought about that, but not football. He's saying there is. To me, it's a little bit, it can be more debatable. But if you ever watch a football clock, let's say, Dylan Riley, just his first pass of the year, hopefully it's a 90-yard touchdown bomb. Let's say it just, oh my God, happens to be an incompletion. Watch the clock. It does not stop immediately. At least 2 more seconds always rolls off. At least. That is the norm. That is just the norm. And it's always annoyed me, which is why I'm so aware of it. I'm like, why doesn't it stop quicker? I don't know. Is it just because the human being has to take the finger and hit the button and the button takes there's 1 to 2 seconds worth of reaction time in here? So not only do I not think there was a second left, even if you could stop it immediately in that game, then you've got to factor in the fact that there's always at least 1 to 2 more seconds to come off the clock that was not factored in at all, because now you're changing how we keep track of time at the most important time of the game. However you keep track of it, it's got to be consistent. I wish the clock stopped sooner. Watch it. Watch the next football game that you watch. Is the UFL going on right now? I pay no attention to that, with all due respect. Whatever the next football game is that you watch, that's on TV. It's got to be on TV. There is always 1 to 2 more seconds to go off when a guy goes out of bounds, when a guy gets tackled. Okay, if he's inbounds, it doesn't really make sense unless it's a first down. They got to move the chains. They stop the clock. Or if it's an incomplete pass and the ball hits the ground, like with Colt McCoy. That's how it works. That's always kind of bothered me. That's never been factored in.
I've got a couple people on the text line saying, going to the same game. Penn State, 1982 at Happy Valley, when Penn State drove the field and passes were clearly out of bounds. That from Big B, but a lot of people say Bradford Baldwin throwing that in there too.
So, okay. Do you remember when we were leaders and legends, those wonderfully named divisions, and our crossover rival every year was going to be Penn State? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Like a decade ago, and I think we played like 2 or 3 times, and then they decided to do East-West and, go by geographic location. I thought that was great. And I think there's some inherent history with us and Penn State. 94. All right. Yeah. They were the other undefeated team that year. 82, where the guy was about 19,000 and 224 yards out of bounds. So I interviewed Osborne last fall, and I always ask people, hey, is there something that people don't know or something you want to share? And he shared a conversation with Joe Paterno about 10 years later. It was in early to mid 90s. And Joe Paul out of nowhere to Osborne goes, that catch in 82, he just might have been out of bounds, Tom. And that was all he said to him. And Osborne shared that on the interview. So there was they're a big top 10 brand in college football, top 15 or worse, probably top 10 with no major rival. Michigan and Ohio State have each other. It's kind of supposed to be Michigan State, but I don't think anybody really views it that way. We've got Iowa, obviously, but at the time, there was nothing between us and Iowa because we had just started in the Big Ten, and geographic location made no sense. But as far as big-time brands playing each other every year, Big Ten opponents, and a little bit of history there, I thought it was perfect. I would love, if we're going to play Iowa every year, there's certain rivalries within the Big Ten I'd like to keep going. I'd like to keep Iowa. I'd like to keep Wisconsin. I'd like to keep Minnesota. And I wouldn't hate Penn State. Now, some people are going to be like, oh, that's a really tough game every year. Well, are we going to duck everybody or what? So for me, those are kind of some of the schools that pop into my head. I think that's a great little insight and point that they made there on the text line. Anything else?
Just a couple of thoughts there. A couple of people chiming in with Armando Galarraga. I've said that name. Galarraga. 2020, his perfect game being thrown off by a botched call. 6'3", 5'8" says the tuck rule. So got a few games in here, a few thoughts in here about when times when blown calls have kind of changed the course of the games.
So I'm not familiar with the Andres Galarraga one. But the tuck rule, that's a good point. Literally changed rules, changed a lot of things. Changed who literally won the Super Bowl that year. Because otherwise the Raiders would have gone. I don't know if they would have won, but the Patriots wouldn't have won because they wouldn't have been in it. So that's another good point right there. All right, if you got anything else from the text line, let me know. So Joel Klatt on his show, his top 5, let me see the exact headline here. Top 5 non-conference games that should be played every year. Number 5. I don't disagree with any of these inherently. I do have a preference, though, that we're going to get into. USC Notre Dame. Why they play every year? No idea. But I love it, and I would not change that. Kansas, Missouri. And when I saw this, I think this rivalry gets overlooked. It does. I lived in St. Louis. So there's a bit of a rivalry between Missouri and Illinois, but they don't play often enough for it to be a big deal. But Kansas and Missouri, that border war, that border rivalry is very, very real. And I would love, this is kind of a more under the radar one, which I appreciated this, to be honest with you. You want some more under the radar ones? Maybe Washington State, Oregon State. Maybe those are a little bit too obvious, but most people kind of overlook those. If I'm Washington and Oregon, do I really want to make one of my tougher games each and every year an in-state rivalry game versus now what are G5 teams? I don't know if they view it the same way. But as a college football fan, Kansas, Missouri, those types of rivalries I just mentioned, those are great rivalries. The old backyard brawl, West Virginia, Pittsburgh, that was a great rivalry I'd love to see more often. Florida, Miami. This is phenomenal. This is a phenomenal suggestion. The issue you're going to run into, if Florida plays in the SEC, it's a pretty good conference. They play Florida State every year. That ain't going anywhere. If you're Florida, do you really want to add Miami to that mix every year? They're in the mix right now which is one of the reasons that Florida has such a brutal schedule. They've got their SEC schedule, which is pretty tough. Then they play Florida State, who's supposed to be much better this year. Then they play Miami, who's supposed to be a top 10 team. Then you got one of the best G5 teams, another in-state rival in USF. That's challenging. So I love Joel's thought process here. I just don't know how realistic it is. Now, again, I think there's going to come a day where Miami and Florida State are either in the Big Ten. Miami could go to the Big 12, honestly, or the SEC, although I do hear strong rumors that the Big Ten and SEC are not actually that interested in Florida State and Clemson. But we got some time to sort that out. Florida, Miami playing every year, I think is great. I don't know how Florida feels about it. Number 2 and number 1. And number 1, I'm going to go to number 1. Oklahoma State. And here's a quote from Clapp. And I quote, "Man, I want Bedlam every year. Nothing is scheduled right now." In December, Joe Castiglione, the athletic director at Oklahoma, said it wouldn't be until well into the 30s. This is how you know he's directly being quoted here, that we're going to get this matchup. So probably into like the 2030s, those years. "We should be better than that in college football," end quote. So he wants to see this matchup every year. This is absolutely a great rivalry. Oklahoma State plays Oklahoma tough, and they beat them a lot of times too. Even when their team isn't quite as good, their record isn't quite as good, they're not as talented a lot of times. But Van Gundy, other than last year, has done a phenomenal job there. They play offense, they score points, they're entertaining, they're fun to watch, and it's a good rivalry. Bedlam, Oklahoma State. My only issue with it, I'm going to get to in a second. Colorado versus Nebraska. So, of course, this is Joel Klatt, former Colorado quarterback. Boom, the big dog. He wants to see every year play Colorado as Nebraska, of course. All right, the little brother punching up to the big brother. All right, so to speak. That's still how I'm going to view it. It just is what it is. All right. And I quote, "This is the rivalry that I grew up on. This is the rivalry that made me personally fall in love with college football. We should have Colorado, Nebraska every single year. There were so many years, if you look from the middle of the 80s until about 2005, this matchup likely either decided the Big 8 champion or the Big 12 North Division champion," end quote. Fair point. And to that 2005 game, I played in that game. That was my junior year. All right. I think we beat them 30-3. We had the ball for like 40 minutes. And why that matters to me, I have asthma. So altitude legit bothers me. I never played at the Broncos. Every year I would check the NFL schedule for 2 things. Cold games didn't bother me. Don't care. Don't care. It could be 0 degrees. Doesn't bother me. Big people don't hate cold weather. Hot games, and at Denver. I always check those 2 things. I never played at Denver. Obviously played at Boulder twice. Now, my redshirt freshman year, I was on nickel. So I played like 15 snaps the whole game. I ran around like a madman. Then I'd get like 15 plays off. But my junior year, I did not come off the field. Hardly at all. And I don't know that I was concerned going into the game, but I was kind of like, man, I don't know how's it going to go. We were only on the field for 20 minutes. Our offense just like controlled the entire game. First of all, I was happy that we won. I was happy that we dominated them. Their entire student section got kicked out. They talked trash before the game. We about had a brawl at midfield before the game. I don't remember if there was a couple punches thrown or not. I know it was very close to an all-out brawl because they started talking trash to us, and then we mollywhopped them 30-3. So I remember that game very, very well.
I was saying, did you have a Restore the Order shirt?
Yes.
You did?
I do. I actually still have that shirt.
That is awesome.
I actually still have that shirt.
How many guys had that on the team? Or was that kind of team-wide? Or is that
I think it was team-wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was team-wide.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've still got that shirt. I kept all my shirts from when I played at Nebraska. So when you look at Nebraska, Colorado, if we played them every year and Oklahoma State played every year, I'd be cool with that. I think that'd be great for college football. What I would prefer, though, because in my opinion, the greatest rivalries in college football, like of all time, are like Ohio State, Michigan. I think Texas, Oklahoma has to be in that mix. And I think Nebraska, Oklahoma. Now, it's not viewed the same way anymore ever since we joined the Big 12 in 96, and they declined to play us every year in the crossover. And it just hasn't been the same since. But if you remember, up until then, Nebraska, Oklahoma was probably one of the top 3 rivalries in all of college football. At that time, it had kind of become lopsided in our favor at that time. There were some ugly games in our favor. But you could argue it was right there with Ohio State, Michigan, maybe Texas, Oklahoma, like 1A, 1B, and they were maybe 1C. It's not viewed the same way anymore, but I would love to see Nebraska, Oklahoma every year, even if that means Oklahoma State can't play. Maybe that's just riddled with my bias. But for me, my Husker bias, for me, that if you can bring back one of the most historic rivalries of all time and play it each and every year, plus it's now Big Ten SEC, which is just weird. All right, the conferences that we're both in, especially for Oklahoma being in the SEC now, That's what I would prefer. What are your thoughts there, Jake? Do we have anything else off the text line?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because it just kind of ties back to what you experienced growing up. For me, I had heard more about I'm more of a Big 12 kid, I suppose, than a Big 8 kid. And so I'd heard about the Oklahoma rivalry, experienced a little bit of it in 2001 in some of those games there. But to me, the Nebraska Colorado game just kind of stands out. But I will say this, and this is I guess Joel Klatt put that up until 2005. From about 2006 until 2 years ago, Nebraska Colorado could have played every year, and the nation wouldn't have batted an eye. And a lot of that's on Colorado. Nebraska hasn't held up their end of the bargain either. But I mean, that was a really down program, as we know, for about 15 years before Deion Sanders got there. So now that they're back, there's kind of all this renewed and energy and feelings toward them. But that would have been, I guess that just wouldn't have done a whole lot for anybody in college football. I don't think if they'd have done it, since Nebraska left the Big Ten. Now that Colorado's back, it kind of gets those feelings going again.
So when you look at the top 10 upcoming college football non-conference series in the upcoming years that are scheduled to be played, Nebraska, Oklahoma in 2029, 2030 is in there. Colorado and Florida starting in 2028. Texas, Notre Dame in 2028. Notre Dame, Alabama in 2029 and 2030. Miami and Auburn in the next 3 to 4 years. Notre Dame and Florida. Clemson, Oklahoma. Ohio State, Georgia. Michigan, Notre Dame. That's a great non-conference rivalry that I miss.
Yeah, that's my favorite one, bro.
I forgot about that one. I'd put that in the top 5 every year. 2 of the top 5 brands, always really good. And just the history that they had year after year after year. I missed that game. And Alabama, Ohio State. I mean, these are a lot of big-time programs, big-time brands that are going to be playing each other in the future, including Nebraska, Oklahoma in 2029 and 2030. Out of the ones I mentioned, I mean, it's hard to pick which ones you look forward to the most. Again, Ohio State, Bama, Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Florida, Texas, Notre Dame. Colorado, Florida is interesting to me. Just if Colorado can be any good at all and Deion can do his thing, that could be an entertaining series. Obviously, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Alabama, Auburn, and Miami. This is weird for me to say. I miss Miami being consistently good year in and year out. It's just better for college football when teams like Nebraska and Miami, I almost said Colorado, I just can't say it, but when those other 2 schools that I mentioned are good, I think it's better for college football. With Deion at Colorado, the better Colorado is, with him being there, the better it is for college football. This year, all right, again, the college football returns in exactly 100 days. The season returns in exactly 100 days. We've got, let me see here, week 1, a lot of week 1 matchups. Notre Dame at Miami, week 1 is scheduled to kick off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ABC. That's going to be a big-time matchup. Obviously, Nebraska and Cincinnati was just announced that Thursday night, August 28th, Kansas City, Arrowhead is going to be on ESPN. That's exciting. What do you think about that? That's got to be exciting it is exciting for everybody.
Yeah, I love it, and it's the first time Nebraska will play on ESPN since the late 2022. So kind of interesting detail there.
Oh wow. Okay. Let me see here. We got to go to break. I had one other thing that I was going to share during this segment, and it has escaped me. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Other notable week 1 matchups. Iowa State, Kansas State. That's a big-time Big 12 one. Syracuse, Tennessee. All right. Can Tennessee knock them off? Who's going to be playing quarterback for Tennessee? LSU, Clemson. There are people saying that this is the best Clemson team in the past 5 years. There are people saying that this is the best LSU roster they've had since Kelly got there. That could be a very big matchup early on. Notre Dame, Miami. Catholics versus convicts. All right. Boise State, USF. Georgia Tech, Colorado. Georgia Tech could be a sleeper in the ACC. They really could. Alabama, Florida State. Can Florida State bounce back after whatever last year was? Virginia Tech, South Carolina, and TCU versus, well, I was going to say Bill Belichick, but North Carolina and possibly Bill Belichick. I guess we'll see what happens there.